"This cruise is for successful families only," Mom declared. I pulled out my keys and said, "Well, it's my yacht." The boarding passes slipped from her hands. Can you imagine being told you're not successful enough for your own family celebration? Yeah, that happened to me. But what my family didn't know was the luxury yacht they'd chartered for their exclusive party. It was actually mine. My name is Melanie Parker, and at 32, I learned that my family's definition of success simply didn't include me. We're talking about status-obsessed Boston elites, the kind who measure worth by bank accounts and job titles. Our annual family cruise was always a grand showcase of achievements, until I got that text from my mother. "This year's cruise is for successful family members only," she wrote. Oh, if only she'd known. Get ready, because I'm about to reveal how I showed my family exactly who was successful enough to be on board. Growing up in one of Boston's wealthiest suburbs, Brooklyn, meant living in a world where appearance was everything and emotional connection was, well, optional. Our sprawling colonial home, with its perfectly manicured lawn, felt more like a showcase than a sanctuary. The Parker family name carried weight in social circles, but inside those walls, warmth was scarce. My dad, Richard Parker, built his fortune through ruthless investment banking deals that often left smaller companies gutted. His philosophy was simple: measure a person's worth by their income bracket and professional title. Dinner conversations revolved around stock options and portfolio performance, never personal dreams or feelings. His approval came in the form of slight nods when I brought home perfect report cards, followed quickly by questions about how I could improve further. "Money doesn't just talk, Melanie, it commands respect," he'd say, straightening his custom-tailored suit. "Those without it are simply background noise in this world." My mom, Eleanor, perfected the art of social climbing with surgical precision. Her calendar was packed with charity galas and country club functions where networking was her primary sport. She trained me from childhood: sit with perfect posture, speak with measured words, and always maintain appearances. "A lady never shows weakness in public," she'd instruct, applying her signature red lipstick, eyes focused on her reflection rather than on me. And the Parker women are ladies above all else. James, my older brother by 4 years, absorbed our father's lessons like a devoted disciple. By 36, he was a carbon copy of Dad, down to the smug smile he wore when discussing his executive position at a prestigious finance firm. His Harvard MBA and corner office were family conversation staples, weapons he wielded to establish dominance at every gathering. "This deal I closed last week," he'd begin, eyes scanning the room to ensure everyone was listening, brought in 8 figures before lunch on Tuesday. Allison, my younger sister, 29 and picture perfect, took a different route to family approval. She married Bradley Hamilton, heir to a hotel empire, and transformed herself into the ultimate trophy wife. Her Instagram feed showcased vacation homes, designer wardrobes, and elaborate parties that our mother shared proudly with her social circle. "Bradley surprised me with another diamond bracelet for our anniversary," she'd announce, wrist extended for obligatory admiration. "He says, a woman like me deserves only the best." The Parker family definition of success was carved in stone: Ivy League education, corporate career climbing, prestigious address, and preferably marriage into equal or greater wealth. Anything else was considered failure. Or worse, embarrassment. I tried desperately to fit this mold throughout my youth. I attended the right private schools, joined the expected clubs, and eventually enrolled in business school as planned. My internships at blue-chip financial institutions earned temporary nods of approval, particularly from my father, who interpreted this as following in his footsteps. But something inside me withered with each passing day in those sterile office buildings. The fluorescent lighting seemed to drain not just the color from my skin, but the life from my spirit. Spreadsheets and profit projections left me hollow, while my classmates and colleagues thrived on the competitive energy. By 25, I couldn't maintain the charade any longer. The panic attacks in bathroom stalls between meetings became more frequent. The Sunday night dread began extending backward into weekends, until there was no relief. My body was sending signals my mind couldn't ignore. "I'm leaving finance," I announced at a family dinner 7 years ago, my voice steadier than my hands. I've accepted a position at Harborview Marina. The silence that followed seemed eternal before erupting into predictable responses. Working at a boat dock? Is this some kind of quarter-life crisis joke? James laughed, not bothering to hide his disdain. Meline, think about what this will look like to everyone. My mother hissed, already calculating the social damage. My father's disappointment manifested as dismissal. This phase will pass. When reality sets in the first time you need money, you'll be back asking for a reference letter. Only Allison offered faint support, though her words dripped with condescension. Well, I think it's brave to try something different. Not everyone can handle the pressure of real business, after all. The annual Parker family cruise had been tradition since I was 12. Every summer, my parents would charter a luxury yacht for a week of Mediterranean or Caribbean sailing. These trips weren't vacations so much as floating stages for family members to perform their success stories. My role on these cruises evolved from obedient child to family disappointment. Even in my late 20s, I was seated at the kids' table during meals, alongside teenage cousins and family friends' children. My opinions were politely acknowledged, then swiftly ignored during discussions about politics, business, or property investments. Meline has such unique perspectives, my mother would say with a tight smile before changing the subject. What my family didn't know, what I deliberately kept from them, was that my boat dock job had been merely the first step in a carefully crafted plan. I started at the marina to learn the business from the ground up, observing how luxury yacht charters operated, identifying gaps in service, and building relationships with clients and staff alike. Within 2 years, I used my business degree not for Wall Street, but to develop a business plan that secured investors for my first yacht charter purchase. By 30, I had transformed a single boat operation into maritime luxury experiences, a fleet of high-end vessels catering to elite clients along the eastern seaboard. I kept my success quiet, operating primarily through business managers and representatives. The company grew through reputation and excellence, rather than my family name. In some ways, this separation was healing, allowing me to build something truly mine without the weight of family judgment. When my company acquired Azure Dream, a stunning 200-foot luxury yacht with every imaginable amenity, it became our flagship vessel. The purchase made waves in industry publications, but remained unknown to my family, who had long since stopped asking about my little boat job. Each family gathering, I endured their condescension with the private knowledge that my company now generated more annual revenue than my brother's much-lauded executive position. Each dismissive comment became easier to bear, knowing that I had built something meaningful on my own terms. Still playing with boats, Meline? My father would ask at holiday dinners. Something like that, I'd respond, swallowing both pride and the truth. I had been waiting for the right moment to reveal my success, hoping that somehow my family would first recognize my worth without the validation of wealth. I wanted them to see me, Meline the person, not just another achievement to catalog and compare. That foolish hope died with a single text message. The morning had begun like any other Tuesday at Maritime Luxury's headquarters in Boston Harbor. My corner office overlooked the water, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing a view of our vessels bobbing gently in their slips. I was reviewing upcoming charter contracts with my operations director when my phone chimed with a message from my mother. I expected the usual forwarded article about women in business that she occasionally sent, her version of supporting my career choice while simultaneously suggesting improvements. Instead, the words on screen made my coffee turn bitter in my mouth. Meline, the family has decided this year's summer cruise will be a celebration of success. Given your continued career choices, we feel it would be uncomfortable for everyone if you attended. This cruise is for successful family members only. I'm sure you understand. We'll see you at Thanksgiving instead. I read the message 3 times, each repetition bringing a new wave of emotion. Shock gave way to hurt, then anger, then a hollow disbelief. After 20 years of annual cruises, after enduring countless subtle jabs and condescending remarks throughout these trips, I wasn't even deemed worthy of an invitation. My hands shook as I set down my phone. Amanda, my operations director, noticed immediately. Meline, is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I've been uninvited from my family vacation, I said, the words sounding absurd as they left my mouth. Apparently, I'm not successful enough to qualify for attendance. Amanda's expression shifted from concern to indignation. Your family doesn't know you own one of the most prestigious yacht charter companies on the East Coast? They think I work at a marina. Maybe as a manager by now, if I'm lucky. I never corrected them. The admission sounded ridiculous even to my own ears. Call your sister, Amanda suggested. There must be some misunderstanding. I nodded, though I knew there was no misunderstanding. Still, I needed to hear the justification directly. I waited until Amanda left my office before dialing Allison's number. Maddie, hi, my sister answered, her voice carrying that artificial brightness she reserved for uncomfortable conversations. To uninvite me personally instead of letting Mom do it by text? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. A pause. Oh, she already told you about the cruise. Look, it wasn't my decision, but I do think Mom has a point about the theme this year. The theme being no failures allowed? I couldn't keep the edge from my words. Don't be dramatic, Allison sighed. It's about appearances. Bradley's parents are joining us along with some of James's business associates. The conversations will all be about investments and business expansions. You'd feel out of place. Because working at a marina doesn't count as real success? I stated flatly. I'm not saying that, she backpedaled, though we both knew that's exactly what she meant. It's just a different world. Plus, you know how small the quarters can feel, even on luxury yachts. We needed to limit numbers, and it made sense to focus on family members who share common interests. Where are you even going this year? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. We've chartered this amazing vessel called Azure Dream for a Bahamas cruise. Apparently, it's the crown jewel of some boutique charter company. Dad pulled strings to get it, since it's usually booked years in advance for celebrities and royalty. The irony was almost too perfect. They had chartered my flagship yacht, the very symbol of the success they believed I lacked, to celebrate their superiority without me. Sounds nice, I managed, my mind already racing with implications. It's supposed to be spectacular. 6 staterooms with private bathrooms, a jacuzzi on the sun deck, gourmet chef, the works. Maybe next year you can join again when it's just a regular family trip, right? Right. Next year. I ended the call shortly after, claiming a meeting I needed to attend. As soon as Allison was off the line, I felt the full weight of the exclusion crash down. Years of seeking approval, of quietly proving myself while hoping for recognition, culminated in this casual dismissal. I closed my office door, sank into my chair, and allowed myself 5 minutes of silent tears, something I hadn't indulged in since leaving the corporate world. The knock on my door came from Taylor Foster, my best friend since college and now Maritime Luxuries marketing director. She entered without waiting for a response, a habit born from years of friendship. Amanda told me what happened, she said, closing the door behind her. Your family chartered Azure Dream without knowing it's yours. I nodded, wiping away the last traces of tears. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. Taylor's expression shifted from sympathy to something more calculating. This is perfect, actually. Perfect? Being deemed not successful enough for my own family standards is perfect. No, Taylor smiled, a gleam in her eye that I recognized from countless marketing campaigns. Being able to show up on your own yacht and watch their faces when they realize who really owns it? That's perfect. The thought had already crossed my mind, but I dismissed it as petty. I don't know, Taylor. I've kept my success quiet for a reason. I wanted them to value me for me, not for what I've accomplished. And how's that working out? Taylor asked, arching an eyebrow. They've had 7 years to see your worth beyond financial metrics, and instead, they're uninviting you from a family tradition to save face with in-laws and business associates. Her words stung because they were true. I had given my family every opportunity to recognize my happiness and passion as valid measures of success. Instead, they had doubled down on their narrow definition to the point of excluding me entirely. What would I even say? Surprise, the boat you're standing on belongs to your failure daughter. Taylor leaned forward, her expression serious. You say nothing at first. You show up as the owner, doing a routine check-in with the captain and crew. Let the revelation happen naturally. They need this reality check, Meline. Not just for your sake, but for theirs. The idea began to take root, watered by years of accumulated hurt. Perhaps Taylor was right. Perhaps some lessons could only be learned through direct experience rather than gentle nudging. I picked up my phone and called Captain Marcus Miller, who had been with me since the beginning of Maritime Luxury and was scheduled to command Azure Dream for the upcoming charter. Captain Miller, I need to discuss the Parker family charter next week, I began. Yes, the Parker party, 7-day Bahamas cruise departing next Thursday. Is there a problem with the arrangements, Miss Parker? No problem, I replied, a plan forming with each word. But there is a situation you should be aware of. The clients are actually my family, and they don't know I own the company or the yacht. A pause on the line. I see. And would you prefer we maintain that confidentiality during their charter? Actually, I'll be joining the cruise. Not as a guest initially, but as the owner conducting a quality check. I'd like the crew briefed accordingly, but no one should inform my family of my position before I arrive. Understood, Miss Parker. When should we expect you? I'll come aboard approximately 2 hours after they've settled in. Enough time for them to feel comfortable, but before departure. As I ended the call, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and determination replacing my earlier hurt. For 7 years, I had built a business while carrying the weight of my family's dismissal. Perhaps it was finally time to set down that burden and stand in the full light of what I had accomplished. You're doing this? Taylor asked, watching my expression shift. I'm doing this, I confirmed, straightening my shoulders. It's time they saw me. Really saw me as I am. 7 years earlier, I had stood in the ornate foyer of my parents' home, suitcases packed and resignation letter submitted to the investment firm where I had worked for 3 miserable years. My father's laughter still echoed in my ears from the night before. The maritime industry? Boats, Meline, be serious. He had scoffed over his crystal tumbler of scotch. What do you know about boats besides riding on them during our vacations? What Richard Parker didn't know was that I had spent 6 months researching the luxury yacht charter industry before making my decision. What he didn't see were the nights I spent poring over business models and market analyses while still fulfilling my soul-crushing finance duties. What he couldn't understand was that his daughter had inherited his business acumen but chosen to apply it to something that brought her joy. My first real step toward independence came when I took a risk he would have never approved. I leveraged my trust fund inheritance, the money meant for a down payment on a Beacon Hill townhouse, to purchase a modest 30-foot yacht. That single vessel, which I named First Light, became the cornerstone of what would eventually grow into maritime luxury experiences. Those early days tested every ounce of my determination. I worked 18-hour days, learning the business literally from the deck up. Mornings began before sunrise, preparing vessels for clients. Afternoons were spent on marketing and building industry connections. Evenings involved cleaning and maintenance, often alongside the small crew I could barely afford to pay. You won't last 3 months, James had predicted during a particularly tense family dinner. The novelty will wear off when you realize how much work it is to play with boats all day. What my brother failed to understand was that hard work doesn't feel like sacrifice when you're building something you believe in. Yes, my hands developed calluses unfamiliar to Parker women. Yes, I collapsed into bed exhausted most nights. But for the first time in my life, I woke up eager to face each day. Now, as I prepared to confront my family on Azure Dream, these memories fueled my resolve. The week leading up to the charter became a careful balance of business operations and personal preparation. In my closet at home, I deliberated over what to wear for this unexpected reunion. The outfit needed to strike the perfect balance, professional enough to command respect, but casual enough to suit a yacht owner checking in on operations. I selected crisp white linen pants, a navy blue silk blouse, and gold accessories that whispered rather than shouted wealth. The ensemble was completed by Sperry boat shoes, practical yet perfect for the setting. No power suits, I told myself, setting aside the corporate armor I'd once relied on. This isn't about impressing them on their terms anymore. At the office, I met with my executive team to ensure operations would run smoothly during my absence. Maritime Luxury had grown to a team of 40 full-time employees and dozens of contracted crew members across multiple vessels. I'll be accessible by phone for emergencies, I explained to the group gathered in our conference room, but Amanda will handle day-to-day decisions while I'm away. Are you sure you want to do this? Asked Natalie from our finance department, who knew something of my complicated family dynamics. A week trapped on a boat with them after such a revelation could be intense. That's exactly why I need to do it, I replied. We've all been playing roles for too long. It's time for authenticity, whatever the outcome. The meeting with Azure Dream's crew was conducted via video call the day before departure. Captain Miller had already briefed them on the unusual situation, but I wanted to address them personally. This is not about embarrassing anyone, I emphasized to the attentive faces on screen. Treat all guests with our standard excellence. The only difference is that when I arrive, you'll acknowledge me as owner rather than as a family member joining late. Understood. Understood, Miss Parker, replied Sophia, the chief stewardess. We'll handle the situation with discretion. The night before the confrontation, I stood before my bathroom mirror, practicing what to say when the moment came. Every scenario I imagined ended differently, from tearful reconciliations to explosive arguments. This is my yacht, I said to my reflection, then shook my head. Too aggressive. What a surprise, finding you all here. I tried instead. Too passive. After dozens of attempts, I accepted that no script would adequately prepare me for the organic reality of the moment. This realization brought both anxiety and liberation. My phone chimed with a text from Taylor. Remember, you built something extraordinary on your own terms. Tomorrow, they get to see the real Melanie Parker. Sleep well, Captain. Her words centered me. This confrontation wasn't about revenge or even validation. It was about truth, about stepping fully into my identity after years of hiding portions of myself to maintain fragile family peace. I packed a small suitcase with essentials for the week, including meaningful items that represented my journey, the business plan for Maritime Luxury I'd written in a coffee shop after quitting finance, the keys to First Light, and a photo of my current team celebrating our company's 5th anniversary. The morning of departure brought crystalline blue skies and perfect sailing conditions. I drove to our private marina, where several of our vessels were docked, including smaller yachts that service day charters. Azure Dream would be departing from a larger commercial marina, where my family would expect to board a chartered vessel. As I parked my car and felt the familiar calm that always descended when surrounded by water and boats, I reminded myself of a truth I had discovered over these past 7 years. Success wasn't defined by others' recognition, but by creating a life that aligned with my values and passions. Whether my family could accept this version of success remained to be seen, but I was done diminishing my light to make others comfortable with their definitions. With that thought firmly in mind, I began the drive to the commercial marina, where Azure Dream and my unsuspecting family awaited. I arrived at Liberty Harbor Marina 30 minutes after my family's scheduled boarding time, parking in the executive section reserved for yacht owners and management. I took a moment to collect myself before exiting the car. The familiar sounds of the marina, gentle water lapping against hulls and halyards clinking against masts, calmed my racing heart. From my vantage point in the parking area, I could see Azure Dream docked majestically at the end of the pier. At 200 feet, she dominated the marina, her sleek white hull gleaming in the afternoon sun. The vessel represented not just a business investment, but a personal triumph, a physical manifestation of the path I had chosen for myself. Through my sunglasses, I observed my family boarding. Even from a distance, their behavior told a familiar story. My father moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to ownership, though he was merely a client. My mother paused at the gangway to survey their surroundings, likely assessing who might be watching their grand entrance. James directed the dockhand regarding luggage with unnecessary authority, while Allison posed for what appeared to be photos or video at the yacht entrance, her designer sun hat perfectly positioned. I watched as they were greeted by Sophia and the crew, noting how my father barely acknowledged the steward who took his bag, while my mother immediately began what appeared to be instructions or requests before even fully boarding. The scene confirmed what I already knew from countless client reports. Wealthy clients often revealed their true character in how they treated service staff. After allowing 20 minutes for them to settle in, I began my approach. I had deliberately dressed in a way that balanced professionalism with the casual elegance expected of someone in the yachting world. My white linen pants and navy silk blouse moved gently in the marina breeze as I walked confidently down the dock toward Azure Dream. As I reached the security checkpoint at the base of the gangway, I was stopped by Thomas, our security officer, who was playing his role perfectly. "Afternoon, ma'am. This is a private vessel. May I help you?" he asked, his expression professionally neutral, though his eyes held recognition. "I'm here to speak with Captain Miller," I replied, loud enough for anyone on the lower deck to hear. Before Thomas could respond, I saw my mother appear at the railing above, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock to something resembling anger when she recognized me. She quickly descended to the gangway entrance, intercepting me before I could board. "Meline," she hissed, maintaining her social smile though her eyes were cold. "What are you doing here?" I was very clear this trip is for successful family only. The familiar pain of her dismissal flared briefly before being extinguished by the knowledge of what was about to unfold. Before I could respond, Captain Miller appeared behind her. "Miss Parker," he said with a respectful nod. "We weren't expecting you until later. Everything is prepared for your inspection." My mother's perfectly maintained composure faltered. "You know my daughter?" "Of course," Captain Miller replied with practiced ease. "Miss Parker is our employer." "There must be some mistake," my mother insisted, her voice rising slightly. "We chartered this yacht through Maritime Luxury Experiences." I reached into my pocket and withdrew my set of keys, including the master key to Azure Dreams Bridge, each featuring the company's distinctive logo. "Well, Mother," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "It is my yacht. I believe I'm entitled to be here." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. My mother's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, a rare moment of speechlessness for Eleanor Parker. Behind her, I could see my father had approached, his expression transitioning from annoyance to confusion. "What's happening here?" he demanded, looking between Captain Miller and myself. "Miss Parker owns Maritime Luxury Experiences," Captain Miller explained professionally. "Azure Dream is the flagship vessel of her fleet." My father's jaw physically dropped, a cartoon reaction I would have found amusing under different circumstances. James appeared next, followed by Allison and her husband Bradley, all drawn by the commotion at the entrance. "Maddie owns this?" Allison blurted, her perfectly manicured hand gesturing to encompass the entire yacht. "Not just this yacht," Captain Miller continued, apparently enjoying the reveal more than his professional demeanor suggested. "Miss Parker owns the entire charter company, one of the most successful on the eastern seaboard, I might add." I stepped past my still speechless mother onto the deck of my vessel, feeling the familiar sense of pride as my shoes touched the teak decking I had personally selected during Azure Dream's last renovation. "The maritime industry has been good to me," I said, unable to resist the understatement. "Captain Miller, I'd like to greet the rest of the crew before we depart." "Of course, Miss Parker." They're assembled in the main salon as requested. As I moved toward the interior of the yacht, my family parted before me like the Red Sea, their expressions ranging from my father's calculating reassessment to James's naked disbelief to Allison's complex mix of embarrassment and admiration. My mother recovered enough to attempt damage control, falling into step beside me. "Meline, darling, why didn't you tell us about all this? Of course we would have been proud." The transparent pivot made me pause. I turned to face her directly, aware that the entire family was watching our exchange. "Would you have been, Mother? Because less than 48 hours ago, you informed me I wasn't successful enough to join this cruise. Nothing about me had changed in that moment from the person you've been dismissing for 7 years. The only difference now is that your definition of success has been satisfied." Color rose in her cheeks. "That's not fair. We simply didn't understand the scope of your hobby." "My company," I corrected firmly, "which employs 40 full-time staff and generates annual revenue that would surprise you. And no, I didn't tell you because I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I own." Clearly, that was asking too much. Without waiting for her response, I continued into the main salon, where the crew stood at attention. Each member greeted me by name with genuine respect, a stark contrast to the conditional acceptance I had sought from my family for decades. Thank you all for preparing Azure Dream to our standards, I addressed them. This charter is unusual given my relationship to the clients, but I expect the same excellence we always provide. You're representing not just me, but everyone at Maritime Luxury. As the crew dispersed to their duties, I turned to find my entire family had followed and now stood awkwardly around the salon's perimeter. The power dynamic had visibly shifted, leaving them uncertain how to proceed in this new reality where I was not the family disappointment, but the owner of the very symbol of luxury they had used to exclude me. I've had the Azure suite prepared for you, I informed them, referring to the yacht's premium stateroom, unless you'd prefer I take other accommodations during the cruise. You're staying, my father asked, finding his voice at last. It is my yacht, I replied simply, and apparently, I'm successful enough to qualify for attendance now. The first dinner aboard Azure Dream was an exercise in social navigation, more complex than any business negotiation I had ever conducted. I chose to arrive last to the dining salon, a reversal of my usual punctuality that served a strategic purpose. When I entered, my family was already seated around the custom mahogany table I had commissioned from a Maine craftsman the previous year. Conversation halted abruptly as I took the seat at the head of the table, a position my father had undoubtedly assumed would be his. Chef Marcel had prepared his signature seafood feast, featuring locally sourced lobster and seasonal vegetables. The irony wasn't lost on me that this menu, which I had approved months ago as Azure Dream's welcome dinner, was now being served to the very people who thought I couldn't distinguish between yacht maintenance and yacht ownership. This food is exquisite, my mother offered after several minutes of awkward silence. You must be very hands-on with your business, Meline. The olive branch was predictable, Eleanor Parker's attempt to re-establish comfortable footing after her worldview had been disrupted. I believe in knowing every aspect of my operation, I replied, taking a sip of the Sancerre I had selected for the evening. From engine specifications to linen thread counts. That explains why everything feels so cohesive, Allison chimed in, her tone suggesting she was making a profound observation about design principles. The aesthetic is so you, now that I think about it. The aesthetic is intentional luxury with practical functionality, I corrected gently. But yes, I was involved in every design decision. My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. How many vessels in your fleet currently? The question was typical Richard Parker, immediately assessing the scale of the business to assign it proper value in his mental hierarchy. We operate 8 luxury yachts ranging from 60 to 200 feet, with 2 more under construction in Rhode Island, I answered, watching his expression shift as he calculated the potential valuation. Always had a good head for business, he declared with newfound approval. Must be the Parker genes. I'd say it was despite the Parker expectations, not because of them, I countered, unwilling to allow him to retroactively claim credit for success he had actively discouraged. James, who had been sullen since the revelation, attempted to reassert his status. 8 vessels is impressive for a boutique operation. Have you considered scaling more aggressively? With proper capital investment and the right strategic partnerships, you could double that within 18 months. His suggestion was exactly what I would have expected from someone with his background, prioritizing rapid growth over sustainable operations. We're expanding at a pace that allows us to maintain our quality standards, I explained. Luxury experiences depend on attention to detail that doesn't scale easily. Our clients choose us specifically because we aren't a mass-market operation. James opened his mouth to argue, but was interrupted by our cousin Amanda, a recent college graduate who had been invited as James's guest and had remained quiet until now. I think what Meline has built is amazing, she said with genuine admiration. Creating something that reflects your personal values while still being commercially successful is the dream, isn't it? Her comment, free from the baggage of our immediate family dynamics, momentarily lightened the atmosphere. Thank you, Amanda, I smiled, grateful for the simple acknowledgement. After dinner, I offered a tour of Azure Dream, an activity I typically delegated to crew members, but felt appropriate to conduct personally under the circumstances. Leading my family through the vessel, I explained features and design elements with the same pride I showed potential investors. The sun deck was completely redesigned last winter, I explained as we reached the top level with its panoramic views. We expanded the jacuzzi area and added these adjustable loungers that our clients particularly appreciate. "This must have cost a fortune," my mother remarked, running her hand along the custom teak railing. It was a significant investment, I acknowledged, but the client experience justified the expense. My father, ever the businessman, asked pointed questions about operating costs, profit margins, and return on investment as we toured. I answered each query directly, watching his expression transition from skepticism to reluctant respect as the fiscal soundness of my business became apparent. The tour ended on the aft deck, where Sophia had prepared after-dinner drinks. As the family dispersed to explore further on their own, my father lingered, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. I hesitated before joining him at the small table overlooking the marina, still illuminated by the last light of sunset. "Your mother and I may have underestimated your business acumen," he began, his version of an apology. "You underestimated me entirely," I corrected. "Not just my business sense, but my determination, my vision, and my definition of success." He nodded slowly, swirling the scotch in his glass. "Perhaps. But you must admit, keeping us in the dark didn't give us the opportunity to revise our assessment. Would it have mattered? Would knowing I owned a successful company have made you value my happiness more? Or would it simply have shifted me from disappointment to acceptable in the Parker hierarchy?" My directness appeared to surprise him. In our family, emotions and confrontations were typically wrapped in layers of polite deflection. "That's rather unfair, Meline. We've always wanted what's best for you. You've wanted what aligned with your vision of success for me. There's a profound difference." Before he could respond, Captain Miller approached with a weather report in hand, providing a welcome interruption to our increasingly tense conversation. "Miss Parker, we're tracking a storm system that's strengthened since this morning's forecast. Nothing dangerous, but we might experience rougher seas than anticipated during our second day." "Thank you, Captain. Please adjust our course as needed for passenger comfort." "I trust your judgment." The brief exchange highlighted the respect between myself and my staff, a dynamic my family was witnessing firsthand. Throughout the evening, Captain Miller's deference to me was not the obligatory politeness shown to a wealthy client, but the genuine professional respect earned through years of collaborative work. As the evening progressed, I observed my family members adjusting to this new reality in their own ways. My father attempted to establish common ground through business discussions. My mother vacillated between pride in my accomplishments and discomfort at having her social hierarchy disrupted. James maintained a competitive edge, asking questions designed to identify weaknesses in my business model. Allison seemed genuinely curious about my journey, though her questions focused primarily on the glamorous aspects rather than the years of hard work. When I finally retired to my stateroom that night, I felt emotionally drained, but also strangely liberated. For 7 years, I had compartmentalized my life, presenting different versions of myself to my family and to my business world. Now, those worlds had collided, forcing an integration I had both feared and needed. As Azure Dream gently rocked with the harbor movements, I reviewed the day's events and prepared for what would undoubtedly be a week of continued adjustments and revelations. The forecast storm seemed an apt metaphor for what lay ahead, both literally and figuratively. The second night of our cruise brought the predicted storm, though its intensity exceeded even the revised forecast. I was awakened just after midnight by the distinctive sound of my satellite phone, used only for operational emergencies. "Miss Parker," Captain Miller's voice was calm but urgent. "The storm system has intensified significantly. We're experiencing gale force winds and heavy seas. I've altered course to minimize impact, but I wanted to alert you before waking the other passengers." "Thank you, Captain. I'll be right up," I replied, already reaching for appropriate clothing. By the time I reached the bridge, Azure Dream was pitching noticeably, her sophisticated stabilizers working hard against the angry waves. Through the windows, I could see nothing but darkness, occasionally illuminated by distant lightning. "Status report," I asked, falling into the familiar pattern of emergency management. "Winds at 40 knots, seas 8 to 10 feet and building," Captain Miller replied. "All systems functioning normally, but passenger comfort will be significantly compromised. We're heading toward that sheltered cove we discussed, but it's still 3 hours away at reduced speed." I nodded, reviewing the navigation display and weather radar. "Have any passengers been alerted yet?" "Not by crew, but the motion will likely wake them soon." As if summoned by his words, the door to the bridge opened to reveal my father in a hastily donned robe, his usual composure absent. "What the hell is happening?" he demanded, grabbing the door frame as the yacht crested a particularly large wave. "We're navigating a stronger-than-expected storm system," I explained calmly. "Captain Miller has altered course towards sheltered waters." Another wave hit, sending a shudder through the vessel. My father's face paled visibly. "Is this normal? Is it safe?" The questions contained something I'd rarely heard in Richard Parker's voice: fear. "Azure Dream is rated for conditions far worse than this," I assured him, "but I understand it can be unsettling if you're not accustomed to it." Before he could respond, more family members began appearing, each in various states of alarm. My mother arrived clutching her silk sleep mask, her perfect composure shattered by the violent rocking. James attempted to maintain his usual confidence, but flinched visibly with each thunderous wave impact. Allison clung to Bradley, her earlier Instagram-perfect presence replaced by genuine terror. "We're all going to die," she whispered dramatically when a lightning flash illuminated the churning sea around us. "No one is dying tonight," I stated firmly, my voice carrying the authority earned through years of maritime experience. "This vessel has weathered far worse conditions. Captain Miller is one of the most experienced captains on the East Coast, and we have a clear plan for passenger safety." My calm demeanor seemed to have a ripple effect, slightly reducing the collective panic. I outlined the situation in simple terms, explaining our course adjustment and expected timeline until we reached calmer waters. "In the meantime," I concluded, "I suggest everyone return to their staterooms and secure any loose items. The crew will bring anti-nausea medication to anyone who needs it." "I'm not going back down there," my mother announced, her voice rising with each word. "It feels like being in a washing machine." For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I saw Eleanor Parker completely undone. Her carefully maintained facade had crumbled, revealing a vulnerability I had never been permitted to witness. "Come with me," I said gently, leading her to the captain's private quarters adjacent to the bridge. "You can rest here where the motion is less severe." Once inside the small but comfortable room, my mother sank onto the bed, her hands trembling slightly. I busied myself finding water and medication, giving her a moment to collect herself. "I never understood why anyone would choose this," she said suddenly. "Living at the mercy of something so unpredictable." The comment seemed to encompass more than just the current storm, touching on my entire career choice. "That's the difference in our perspectives," I replied, handing her the water. "I don't see it as being at nature's mercy. I see it as learning to work with forces greater than myself, adapting rather than always trying to control." She took a small sip, studying me with new eyes. "You're different here. More certain." "I'm the same person I've always been, Mother. You're just seeing me in my element rather than trying to force me into yours." A particularly violent wave caused the yacht to lurch, making her grab my arm reflexively. In that moment of unguarded response, something shifted between us. "I've always been so afraid of anything I couldn't control," she admitted quietly. "My appearance, my social standing, my children's choices. The fear of judgment, of failure." "I know," I said, recognizing the rare moment of authenticity. "But look where we are now. In the middle of what you'd consider a worst-case scenario. And yet, we're going to be fine." Her eyes filled with unexpected tears. "When did you become so strong, Meline?" "When I stopped measuring my worth by your standards and started creating my own," I answered honestly. Our conversation was interrupted by another satellite phone call. The storm was intensifying further, requiring all hands for additional safety measures. I excused myself, promising to return soon, and headed back to the bridge, where the rest of my family had remained, too anxious to return to their staterooms. For the next 2 hours, I worked alongside Captain Miller and the crew, demonstrating a competence and leadership that visibly surprised my family. I communicated clearly with crew members, made decisive calls about course adjustments, and remained calm even as conditions worsened before they improved. James watched with undisguised amazement as I consulted navigational charts and discussed weather patterns with the meteorological experience of someone who had spent years on the water. "You actually know what you're doing," he remarked during a brief lull, the surprise in his voice both gratifying and slightly offensive. "Did you think I've been playing pretend CEO for 7 years?" I asked. "Honestly, I thought you had employees handling the technical aspects while you focused on the hospitality side. I started by doing every job on my first boat myself," I explained. "I can tie every knot, operate every system, and navigate through conditions that would make most recreational sailors head for shore. I built this company from the deck up, not from a corner office down." His expression shifted from surprise to something resembling respect. "That's actually impressive, Maddie." By dawn, we had navigated through the worst of the storm and reached the protected cove Captain Miller had identified. As the yacht's motion calmed and the first light of morning illuminated calmer waters, my exhausted family began to relax. My mother emerged from the captain's quarters looking surprisingly refreshed considering the night's events. She approached me as I was reviewing damage reports with a first mate. "I need to speak with you," she said with unusual directness. "Privately." I nodded, concluding my conversation before following her to a quiet corner of the upper deck. The morning air was fresh and clean after the storm, carrying away the last remnants of turbulence. "Last night changed my perspective," she began without preamble. "Watching you handle that crisis, it was like seeing a completely different person than the daughter I thought I knew." "Or perhaps you're finally seeing who I've been all along," I suggested. She nodded slowly. "Perhaps. I've spent so many years focused on a very narrow definition of success: prestigious career, social connections, financial security, the right address. All external validations," I noted. "Yes. And here you've built something remarkable by rejecting that path entirely." She paused, seemingly struggling with her next words. "When I sent that text uninviting you, I genuinely believed I was protecting both you and the family from uncomfortable comparisons." "You were protecting yourself from having to explain my alternative career choice," I corrected gently. "You're right," she admitted with surprising candor. "And I was wrong. Completely wrong. Not just about the text, but about the past 7 years of dismissing your choices." The acknowledgement, so long awaited and now so freely given, momentarily left me speechless. Into that silence came Amanda, who had been watching our exchange from a respectful distance. "Meline, I just wanted to say how amazing you were last night," she said with genuine admiration. "The way you took charge while staying so calm. I've never seen anything like it." "Thank you, Amanda." "I've been miserable in my finance internship," she confessed, glancing nervously at my mother. "Everyone keeps telling me to stick with it because it's prestigious, but seeing you build something you actually care about, it's inspiring. I'd love to hear more about how you got started." My mother's expression softened as she looked between us. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Amanda. Meline's path has certainly proven worthy of consideration." The simple validation, casual to anyone else but monumental between us, brought unexpected emotion to my throat. As the day progressed, the aftermath of the storm created a strange new atmosphere aboard Azure Dream. Physical danger had disrupted the carefully maintained social hierarchies, revealing authentic personalities beneath polished veneers. My father, shaken by his helplessness during the crisis, observed my interactions with the crew with thoughtful consideration. James, whose competitive edge had temporarily dulled, asked genuine questions about my business journey without attempting to one-up my answers. By afternoon, as Azure Dream continued toward our planned destination under calm skies, my family had been transformed not just by the revelation of my success, but by witnessing the person I had become. The storm had washed away pretenses, creating space for a new understanding that no amount of explanation could have achieved. That evening, as we gathered for dinner under a spectacular sunset, the conversation flowed more naturally than any family gathering in recent memory. Stories were shared without scorekeeping, questions asked with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, and laughter came easily without undercurrents of competition. It wasn't perfect, and years of ingrained patterns wouldn't dissolve overnight, but as I looked around the table at my imperfect family attempting to see each other with new eyes, I recognized that sometimes the most powerful storms are those that clear the air, allowing something healthier to grow in their wake. On the final morning of our cruise, I woke early and made my way to the bow of Azure Dream. The sun was just beginning its ascent, painting the horizon in shades of gold and pink that reflected on the calm water. After the literal and figurative storms of the past week, this moment of tranquility felt especially precious. The sound of footsteps on deck announced my mother's approach. She had taken to rising early during our journey, a departure from her usual habit of carefully preparing herself before appearing in public. "It's beautiful," she remarked, accepting the cup of coffee I offered. "I can see why you love this life." "It has its moments," I agreed, "though it's not always as picturesque as this." She nodded, a comfortable silence settling between us. The events of the past week had fundamentally altered our dynamic, though we were still finding our way through this new terrain. "I've been thinking about our family traditions," she said finally. The annual cruise was meant to bring us together, but somehow it became another competition. Another standard to measure against. Most things in our family did, I observed, without rancor. "Yes," she acknowledged. "Your father and I set that tone." I realize now success became so narrowly defined that we couldn't see beyond our own expectations. Her admission, unthinkable a week ago, demonstrated the subtle shift occurring within her. Eleanor Parker was still a woman who valued appearance and status, but the rigid boundaries of her worldview had begun to flex. "Will you host the family cruise next year?" she asked, surprising me with the question. "On your terms, of course." "I'd like that," I replied, recognizing the request as both apology and olive branch. Later that morning, I found myself alone with my father on the upper deck. He had been the slowest to adjust to our new reality, his decades of measuring worth through traditional success metrics not easily overcome. "I've been reviewing maritime luxuries' public financial disclosures," he began, characteristically focused on business rather than emotion. "Your growth trajectory is impressive." "Thank you," I replied, unsurprised he had done his research. "What I find most remarkable," he continued, his gaze fixed on the horizon rather than meeting my eyes, "is that you achieved this without leveraging the Parker name or connections. You built it entirely on your own merit." Coming from Richard Parker, this observation constituted high praise indeed. "That was important to me," I explained. "I needed to know I could succeed on my own terms." He nodded slowly. "I've spent my career believing there was only one path to legitimate success. Watching you this week has been educational." "Better late than never," I offered with a small smile. "Indeed." He finally turned to face me directly. "I may not fully understand your choices, Meline, but I respect what you've built and, more importantly, who you've become while building it." His words, though still filtered through a business lens, represented perhaps the most authentic connection we had shared in my adult life. As Azure Dream approached the harbor on our final afternoon, the family gathered on the main deck. The journey was ending, but the conversations begun during our week together had opened doors that had long been closed. James, whose competitive nature had softened somewhat, approached me as we prepared to dock. "So, little sister has been the secret success story all along," he remarked, though without his usual edge. "Success isn't a zero-sum game, James," I replied. "Your achievements don't diminish mine, and mine don't threaten yours." He considered this, perhaps for the first time. "I've always measured myself against others. Dad taught us that, didn't he? Always be the best, the richest, the most prestigious." He did. But we don't have to continue that tradition. "Maybe not," he agreed tentatively. "Your company is impressive, Maddie. Different from what I would build, but impressive nonetheless." From James, this qualified acknowledgement represented significant growth. As we completed docking procedures and prepared to disembark, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 7 years ago, I had walked away from my family's prescribed path, terrified but determined to find my own way forward. The road had been challenging, marked by both remarkable triumphs and painful separations. For years, I had carried the weight of my family's disapproval, allowing it to color even my proudest achievements. I had kept my success secret, hoping someday they would value me for myself rather than my accomplishments. That hope had proven naive, but perhaps not entirely misplaced. The revelation of my success had indeed changed how my family saw me, providing the external validation they understood, but more importantly, the week together had offered glimpses of who I truly was beyond balance sheets and business metrics, a person of competence, conviction, and character. As we gathered one final time on the aft deck before departure, Amanda approached with a hesitant smile. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversations," she said, "about finding work that matters to you personally, not just what others expect. I've decided to explore internships in marine conservation next summer instead of another finance position." "That sounds wonderful, Amanda. Let me know if I can help connect you with some of my industry contacts." "Really? That would be amazing." Her genuine enthusiasm contrasted sharply with the measured responses typical of Parker family interactions. My mother, overhearing our exchange, joined us with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "Meline has always followed her own compass," she remarked, surprising me with her supportive tone. "Perhaps more of us should consider doing the same." These small moments of connection and recognition, imperfect though they were, represented the beginning of a healing process long overdue. My family might never fully embrace my chosen path, but they had begun to see me, the real me, perhaps for the first time. As we prepared to go our separate ways, I realized that success had never really been about proving my worth to my family. It had been about discovering my own definition of a life well lived, about building something meaningful that aligned with my values rather than someone else's expectations. The true measure of success wasn't the yacht beneath our feet or the company I had built, but the inner peace that came from living authentically. That lesson, hard-won through years of choosing my own path despite disapproval, was something I would never again compromise. My journey from seeking external validation to finding internal conviction hadn't ended. In many ways, it had only just begun. But as I watched my family members depart, each carrying their own reflections from our unexpected week together, I felt a sense of liberation that no business achievement had ever provided. "Same time next year?" my father asked as he prepared to depart, his question carrying layers of meaning beyond the simple words. "Yes," I replied with a genuine smile, "but next time, everyone gets a proper invitation." Have you ever had to show someone in your life that your definition of success was valid, even when it didn't match their expectations? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is stay true to our path, even when others don't understand it. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more experiences about finding your own way. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that true success is measured by your own happiness, not someone else's yardstick.